Hey, this is Sophia from CNET, here with the top tech stories of the day.
Brought to you by Hot Seat, a new memoir from Jeff Immelt, the former CEO of General Electric. Immelt explores his time at the helm of one of the world's largest companies, from navigating a post-9/11 world to the 2008 financial crisis and more. Buy your copy today.
The third stimulus check provides tens of millions of people with more money this time. However, the new economic rescue law has changes that disqualify roughly 16 million people who got the second check. More specifically, it lowers the income limit for individuals and families. Knowing this, are you one of the millions who are ineligible? Whether you're eligible for the third payment could also depend on which tax return the IRS uses, your 2019 or 2020 taxes. This is what we know about who will and who won't qualify for a $1,400 per person stimulus check. And here's how you can use the IRS check tracking tool to determine if you can expect a payment and how it may arrive. If you're right on the cusp of the income limits, when you file your taxes could make the difference between qualifying for a partial check or not. That's because a third stimulus check is now arriving during tax season. The language in the stimulus bill makes it clear that the IRS will base your next stimulus check off your 2019 or 2020 taxes, whichever is on file when it processes your payment. However, the IRS is reportedly delayed on processing new tax returns. If you made more in 2020 than in 2019, you may want to file later or even request an extension. If you would be disqualified in 2019 and made significantly less in 2020, filing sooner might be to your advantage, but only if the IRS processes your payment before issuing you a stimulus check, something outside your control. The new stimulus check will begin to phase out after $75,000 per the new targeted stimulus plan. If your adjusted gross income, or AGI, is $80,000 or more, you won't be eligible for a third payment of any amount. However, if you make between $75,000 and $80,000, you could get a portion of the check. You'd receive the full amount of your yearly income if your yearly income is less than $75,000. Similar to the single taxpayer cutoff, heads of household with an AGI of $120,000 or more are excluded under the new bill. To get a partial stimulus payment, you'd need to make between $112,000 and $120,000. But to get the full amount, you'd need to make less than $112,000 if you're the head of household. If you and your partner are a married couple filing jointly and have an AGI of $160,000 or higher, you won't be eligible for the third stimulus check. To qualify for the full $1,400 payment, your combined household income would need to be less than $150,000. The amount you could receive would phase out after that amount until you reach the cutoff. If you're considered a non-resident alien by the IRS, you won't be included in the third stimulus check. The government defines a non-resident alien as someone who has not yet passed the green card test or the substantial presence test. For example, if you're studying abroad in the U.S. With the first stimulus check, non-citizens need to have a social security number and live and work in the U.S. to qualify for a payment. However, the second check amended the rules to allow families with a non-citizen spouse to qualify for a second check, even if they are issued a taxpayer identification number by the IRS and not a social security number. If you're considered a non-citizen, you may or may not get a stimulus check, depending on a couple of factors. Under the new bill, mixed status households with at least one family member who has a social security number could be eligible for the third stimulus check, assuming they meet the other requirements, including the income limits. With the first two stimulus checks, people who live in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam, or the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands may have been eligible to receive payments. Whether these groups qualified for a check has in the past been determined by the tax authorities in each territory. These agencies were also directed to make the payments. It's the same situation for the third stimulus check. If you're a non-filer and typically aren't required to file income taxes, you're eligible to receive the third check. However, if you're missing money from a previous check, you may need to take an extra step to get your money by filing your taxes this year. If there's an issue receiving some or all of a third check, it's likely you will need to file a claim during next year's tax season. If a family member has died since you filed your 2020 taxes, whether you get a third stimulus check depends on which tax return the IRS uses. For example, if the IRS goes by your 2019 tax return, it's likely you'd get to keep the amount you received for the deceased person. With the first stimulus check, the IRS asked people to return the money for someone who had died since the previous tax filing. With the second check, if your spouse died in 2020 and your AGI was less than $112,000 a year, you would be eligible for the full $600 amount. In other news, here's CNET reporter Aaron Carson.
Google on Thursday said it plans to invest over $7 billion in new offices and data centers this year as the search giant looks to business operations post-pandemic. The projects will span 19 states and will create at least 10,000 jobs, the company said. The tech giant's decision to double down on real estate comes as companies across the board are reevaluating how they'll conduct business in the future, after most employees worked from home for more than a year as the virus spread around the world. In December, Google CEO Sundar Pichai said the company was considering a hybrid work model in which people work in the office for at least 3 days while working the other days remotely. But he said the new plan may not be available to all workers, like engineers who spend lots of time in data centers. Pichai said, "Coming together in person to collaborate and build community is core to Google's culture, and it will be an important part of our future. So we continue to make significant investments in our offices around the country." Part of the $7 billion investment includes $1 billion toward offices in Google's home state of California. Google will also grow its offices in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and New York, Pichai said. The investment in data centers comes as Google focuses heavily on the expansion of its cloud business, which allows other companies and organizations to rent server space from Google. Last month, Google began disclosing new financial details about its cloud division as the tech giant aims to broaden its business beyond its massive search and advertising operation. Revenue rose to $3.83 billion last quarter from $2.61 billion a year earlier. Google's plans to grow its physical offices may not be surprising for a company that has helped define the culture of Silicon Valley campuses over the last 2 decades. The tech giant pioneered several lavish perks for employees that have become the norm in the tech industry, including free food and gym services on campus. Other tech companies have also started to rethink what work at the office could look like after the pandemic. Last May, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg said the social network giant will allow some employees to work from home permanently. He said about half of Facebook's workforce could work remotely over the next 5 to 10 years. Twitter made a similar announcement, and CEO Jack Dorsey also extended the policy to his other company, mobile payments firm Square.
Finally, video chat and conferencing services like Zoom exploded in use over the past year due to lockdowns and work-from-home mandates during the pandemic. It's been a year of, "You're on mute," "Looks like you froze," and "Is that a cat?" But for many people, Zoom anxiety remains very real. While there is little research on Zoom anxiety, a November 2020 survey of 2,000 homeworkers found it stems from several sources: having tech and audio problems that you can't fix, being unable to read people's body language, feeling like you aren't being heard, having to take a call without time to prepare your appearance, worrying about an unprofessional background, and being talked over. Despite the vaccine rollout and talks of reopening in some areas, many companies won't make workers return to the office full-time in the foreseeable future, so it's likely that video conferencing is here to stay. But if you suffer from anxiety using these on-camera tools, hope isn't lost. We have some practical tips for how to combat Zoom anxiety and make your meetings run smoother. Even if video chat platforms are here to stay as part of our daily lives, anxiety over these calls doesn't have to come along with them. Here are a few things you can do right now to improve the situation and toll on your mental health. First, turn off self-view. Once you log on to a call and make sure you're in frame, right-click your video to display the menu. Choose Hide Myself. You'll still appear to others, but you won't have to stare at yourself the whole time. Invest in a camera shield or some easy-to-remove tape. Even if you accidentally turn on your video, as long as the camera is physically blocked, no one can actually see you until you remove it. Reevaluate the need for video on your calls. If you're hosting a meeting, consider whether it requires video to be on, or if, even better, it can be a phone call so you can get up and walk around. Talk to your manager or call leader. If you aren't the host of most of your video calls but a participant, consider bringing up the issue to your coworkers, your manager, or whoever the person is who's in charge. You might let them know that since you're not in a senior position, you don't want to talk on top of anyone, but still want to participate. You might be able to suggest having an agenda or someone who is facilitating the meeting and making sure every person gets a chance to speak. Feel free to say no to social engagements on Zoom. We're way past the time when virtual happy hours were all the rage. If you're burnt out on video calls, you don't have to go to that Zoom book club meeting or hang out. Be open about your feelings and needs, and your friends should hopefully understand, because who hasn't felt that way at some point this year? And finally, give yourself a break. If you've had any feelings of stress or anxiety over video calling, just know that you're far from alone. Most people are worried on some level about their dog barking during an important call, the Wi-Fi dropping out, or the way they look on camera. At this point, people tend to be pretty understanding of the difficulties that have come with working from home and inviting your colleagues into your personal space in this way. For more of the top tech stories, visit cnet.com.